welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to pick up where we left off with civilian aircraft. And we are in section 1926 to 1935. No, we read this. Hold on, let me find. There we are. We're on airmail and flying boats. Right there. Major change in the U.S. government's transport policy brought about upheaval among the national emerging airlines. By 1931, four major carriers had produced through a process of consolidation. 1935, Contract Airmail Act or Kelly Act was passed into law. So 1935. The act may mark the beginning of the end of the U.S. Post Office airmail flying, as the routes were handed over to commercial enterprises. It was followed May 1926 by the Air Commerce Act, under which designated routes for mail and passengers were created, navigational procedures established, and pilots and aircraft licensed. Ryan Airlines had preempted the government by starting a regular sustained passenger service under its Los Angeles-San Diego Airline brand on March 1st, 1925. But the exponential growth of the air transport in the United States rally began on October 7th, 1925, when an initial 5 airmail routes were awarded to private operators. First among the successful bidders, Ford Motor Company had already been flying an express parcel service with a Ford TAT monoplane. It now added airmail routes to its operations. Other contract companies, as more routine routes were issued, including Varner Airlines, Curtiss Swalling, Roberts Aircraft, Douglas M2, Colonial Air Transport, and the list goes on. PRT bucketed the trend by prioritizing passenger over mail, the latter being the major commodity for most airlines. With passengers squeezed in a capacity allowed, carriers and routes continuing to be established, Boeing Airlines building Model 40A biplanes to service its own contracts, while Florida Airways, Pacific Air Transportation, and so on and so on, altered into the fray. New aircraft. Here's a picture of a Northrop Alpha. So did you get that? Slowly the airlines figured out they can make more money doing just passengers instead of air mail. So they slowly switched. But that's a slow transition. New aircraft. The United States' first truly successful airline appeared in 1926 when Ford Tri-Motors flew for the first time. It represented the realization that safety, performance, and eventually passengers were all among vital for successful operation. Other new aircraft entering service in the 1920s and into the 1930s include Boeing Model 80 and Curtiss Condor. However, the largest capacity machines were often flown with small passengers load, and in a mistaken belief that smaller, faster airlines might be the way ahead, both Lockheed and Northrop produced impressive high-speed mail passenger carriers. Meanwhile, the Post Office forced the merger of TNT and WE to form Transcontinental and Western Air, TWA, before awarding the new company the prime Central Continental routes. Consolidated continued as American Airways was formed out of several existing operations in the south of the country, while United Airlines represented the merger of Boeing Air Transportation, NAT, PAT, and Varney. Pitco and Florida had already merged as Eastern Air Transport, and so by 1931 the four major carriers had established as TWA, American, United, and Eastern, while an entirely separate operation, Pan Am America, had begun operations in South America. So if you don't know, American Airlines is still in operations, United Airlines is still in operations, and Delta Airlines is still in operations. So here's some planes. Here's a Lockheed Orin 1931, and a Consolidated Commodore Pan Am American, that's in 1930s. There you go. Can you read that? Take your time. Enjoy. Oh, get my hand out of your way. Oh, a whole bunch of planes. So we got the Northrop Grumman 20. This one is a Curtiss AT-32B, 1934. This one was 1934. Here's a Lockheed Model 10 Electra, and that's a 1934. And I want to say the Electra was flown by somebody famous. Maybe I just heard the name before. Here's a Sierwinski S-42. Below it is a Martin M30, and that was built in 1935. And then the one below that is a Martin M130, 1935 again. So growing and developing more aircraft to fit more operational needs. Well, we just finished that section. Should we keep going? Yeah, we might as well. Next section is Aviation Adventures, 1930 to 1939. 1930s were a time of record-breaking long-range flights that saw the emergence of several outstanding female pilots. It also the decade of improvement in aircraft design that produced the first truly modern airliner. Several aviators completed meritorious flights that during the 1930s, usually in single-engine airplane over enormous distance. But above all else, the decade saw the rise of aviatrix. First among their pioneer women was a Britain Army Johnson. She departed Condor from Australia on May 5th, 1930, flying her Gipsy Moth, which is, here's a picture of it, or a model of it. Gipsy Moth, and she, I lost her where she was. Oh, there. And she flew to, I don't see where she flew to. Johnson survived the crash en route the journey on May 24th. A little over a year later, she was off again. And a puss moth named Jason II, bound for Japan. She reached Tokyo on August 6th, 1932. She married fellow aviator Jim Monson, and they competed unsuccessful in the 1934 McRoberts race. Amy Johnson took the London Cape Town record in 1936, Cape Town, Africa, before withdrawing from the European aviation scene. Amelia Earhart, one of the most famous women, became globally famous through her aviator exploits in the 1930s. A socialite darling, Earhart was married to the renowned publisher and producer George P. Putton. She became the first woman to cross the North Atlantic solo on May 21st and 20th in 1932, flying the Newfoundland to North Ireland. In August the same year, she flew nonstop from Los Angeles to New Jersey to become the United States' first female nonstop continental flyer. She remained faithful to the Lockheed Vega of her previous records when she flew from Honolulu, Hawaii to Oakland, California on January 11th and 12th, 1935. Here's an example of her aircraft, the Lockheed right there in the middle of the page. Several other women pilots achieved great things during the decade, but perhaps just one more must be mentioned. The Newfoundland's Jean Batten flew from a DH-60 from England to Darwin, Australia, taking more than 4 days off Johnson's record for the journey. Later, Batten completed the first solo flight across the South Atlantic by a woman flying from Perth Gulf from the UK to Senegal, and then across the ocean to Natal, Brazil, in 1935. Now, one thing this doesn't talk about, Amelia Earhart died on a circumnavigation flight that she was trying to attempt as she left going towards Hawaii, I believe. But her plane disappeared and she's never seen again. So, and and airmen too. Of course, men were excelling in the air, none more than Willie Post and his navigator Harold Getty, who circled the globe in a Vega Winnie ME between June 23rd and July 1931. Post repeated the effort solo from 1915 to 22 July 1933 in the same aircraft, but killed in an accident in 1935. Here's an example of that Vega again. Very popular plane, apparently. Hugo Henderson Jr. and Clyde H. E. Pettiborn became the first to fly nonstop from Japan to the U.S. on 4-5 October 31, while Sir Charles King Smith and Captain P.G. Taylor completed a stage crossing of the Pacific from Australia to America and their Lockheed Alter Southern Cross between October 22nd to November 4th, 1934. Newly married to Amy Johnson, Jim Mollison set out from Ireland to attempt the first solo east-west crossing of the North Atlantic on August 18, 1932. His DH-80 Portsmouth, the Heart Continent, landed safely in New Brunswick 31 hours later. In spring 1933, he used the same aircraft to fly solo from the UK to Natal, Brazil, to complete not only the first solo flight from England to South America, but also the first solo east-west crossing of the South Atlantic. At the same time, he became the only pilot to have flown North and South Atlantic solo. Mollison contested the McRoberts Air Race with his wife, flying as his team and the D.H. Havilland D-88 Comet on the route from England to Australia. Unfortunately, their entry was scrubbed by engine problems, but the race was won by another Comet, while one of the new DC-2 airlines came in second. Here's a whole bunch of just quick information. Take your time, pause, read, enjoy some history. 1930 was also a great time for new aircraft development. Boeing flew its first civilian monoplane, the M200,